I'm Lily, and I'll be presenting on pages 272 to 320 of Demon Copperhead. So, in this passage, there were a few different things that stood out to me. So, I'll go ahead and summarize those before we dive into what we'll be doing. So, the first thing that stood out to me in this passage is, first of all, the coal mining situation in Appalachia, the government's control of the economy, making it very difficult for people to leave, controlling the industry. We talked about a lot of this in class, so this is one point that I won't go over in as much detail since we've already learned about it. But based on that first point, there are also two others that I noticed. Right after this, in chapter 36, um, Demon reflects on the fact that he just found out about his background and about coal mining. So in this reflection, he sort of breaks off from the usual narrative of describing the events around him. It's almost like a form of poetry that I don't think Kingsolver has used anywhere else in the novel, not that I have noticed. So I found that part really interesting, and it definitely stuck out to me more. And the main theme of this reflection, which is the third thing we'll go over, we also see this in later passages, but Demon talks a lot about the idea of wanting, the idea of restlessness. Those are two words he uses a lot and that are going to pop up a lot more in later chapters in this same passage. And then finally, the question is, why does he always want more? That's a question that Demon asks himself and that he even breaks away to ask us personally. He tells us that we're invited to find that out with him. Why is he always wanting? He calls this the wanting disease. Um, he has a conversation with Mr. Pegg later about generational differences that I found really helpful in explaining this as well. So I'll tie in some information from that as well to try to figure out why Demon is always wanting more. Try to figure out that out with him. So we'll go ahead and get started. Let me start sharing my screen here. All right. So I've called this the wanting disease. This is one phrase that Demon uses in his self-reflection in chapter 36, and it really stuck out to me a lot more. The fact that he calls it a disease as if it's something he's born with or has been plagued with. He doesn't know which that is. So these are the main points we're going to focus on and the main questions that I have, which I've already summarized, but I have them in writing in case that's easier for you to focus on as well. So the first is that Demon learns about the coal industry and becomes more aware of his upbringing. Because of that, he then reflects on his own mind and how he's constantly restless and wanting more. And then finally, the third question is, why might this disease affect Demon and his generation even more than others? That was a question that I had tying it into his conversation with Mr. Pegg, so we'll go into that. So first, in chapter 36, in the first couple paragraphs, Demon breaks away from the narrative into a self-reflection. This is really unlike his usual narrative style. Um, he even sort of breaks the fourth wall for a second, talking to us as the reader. It's almost like a piece of poetry full of really vivid imagery and metaphors, things that he has never really used in his writing until now. So the first couple of lines of that self-reflection are, I was born to wish for more than I can have. No little fishing hole for Demon. He wants the whole ocean. So this metaphor of the ocean has been a big theme from the very beginning for Demon, that he wants to go see the ocean. He always felt a calling toward it. And that points to the fact that he wants everything. He was born to wish for more than he can have. That's the main goal of this self-reflection and the main point. In a separate passage, this topic comes up again. Demon reflects that he should be satisfied with the beautiful view that he has in front of him. He should be satisfied with all that he has, but he can't enjoy it because he is always still wishing he had more. So this doesn't just come up in the self-reflection, this comes up in multiple different sections throughout the story that Demon is always wanting. And the question he asks himself is, but where did it come from, this wanting disease? Um, so this is something that we'll be going into in the next passage, talking about generational differences and the idea of restlessness. So, and at one point, then Mr. Pegg invites Demon outside to have a conversation with him about Maggot, about why he is being so rebellious to him, why he's just not listening and doing what he's told. He doesn't understand the generational shift. And so Demon explains to him why he believes it's a lot harder for his own generation to settle down, to listen to their elders. And he says, I said maybe the difference was we could see now what all we were missing. With everybody else in the world being richer than us, doing all kinds of nonsense and getting away with it, it makes you restless. There's that word again, restless, that he also uses in the self-reflection. Um, but the first sentence of that quote that Demon uses, maybe the difference was we could see now what all we were missing. That's something that really stuck out to me. Demon mentioned that the growth of TV and cable might be part of the reason why it's so difficult for them to settle down. And this is true in the 90s, which is the main generation, the main decade in which Demon was raised. There were a lot of changes in media, a lot of changes in culture, and so this was probably very difficult for a youth growing up, especially in a low-income household. So we'll talk about that a little bit and bring in some outside texts. So I found one article from Tiffany Dark on the 1990s and cultural shifts at that time, greater forms of media. So in this article, Tiffany Dark says that summarizes that there were new forms of media like more television shows, including the early internet as well. That was a very big change, something that we hadn't really had before. And the article notes that while the internet can be the world's greatest community building tool, since you can see everyone from around the world and talk to them, it could also be the world's and America's most polarizing tool. So this is something that relates to Demon specifically and his generation. At the time, a lot of social movements also became stronger and more prevalent, like the gay rights movement, like further Black representation in media, lots of different cultural shifts. And finally, the Bill Clinton and Monica Lewinsky affair occurred at this time. This caused a lot of distrust and mockery of the presidency and of the government. So it caused people to be really aware that the government could be corrupt sometimes and might do things like rigging the coal industry, things like that that we talk about in the book. So all of these factors in the 90s combined to form a generation that was very critical, that was very hyper aware of everything happening around them in the world. So in the 90s, because of the growth of the internet, the growth of public television, everything was public and a lot easier to know about. This was something that we hadn't really seen a lot up until that point. So this meant it was really easy to start comparing your life with someone else's, to desire what every other person has. It also meant that you were very aware of your social standing, of your class, how you were different from others, and how others maybe had certain privileges that other kids didn't. So these are things that are all going through Demon's head right now as he's growing up in this decade. So, overall, takeaways and analysis of this passage using that knowledge that we have of the 90s and the situation that Demon was in. Demon would have faced a lot of cultural changes, technological changes, and so he would have been extremely aware of the world around him, specifically how he fit into it, whether he was accepted in it, whether he had to change based on what everyone else was doing. Um, and throughout the book, he constantly sees how privileged and how lucky other kids are. He keeps seeing people move on, get their way, and escape once they get older. He's still a kid, so he can't leave. That makes him bitter, focused on what he can't do and what he doesn't have the ability to. So that causes him to always want more than he has because he feels stuck while everyone else is able to move and he can see it happening around him because of all of that new media. So these are the main things the demon is facing in the 90s. So because of the generation in which he was raised, this might help explain Demon's wanting disease, as he calls it. While it might not be the only reason, there could be others, like, of course, the way he was raised. It could just be personal tendency. But the environment he was raised in the 90s probably did influence a lot of his wanting disease. Knowing that he did not have as much as others and really seeing that around him and constantly desiring it more, which makes him very bitter and gives him this wanting disease. So these are the main points and passages that I noticed in the section for today. So thank you.